And so in Madison's mind, it was a way for people to sort through issues in a extended amount of time so that the first impression was not all that they gave. The internet, at least in my point of view, is prefaced on people's first impression of a subject. And that's what they're expected to go with. And that's what the internet motivates you to go with, I should say. And so messages go back and forth in a lightning speed in which we don't really seriously consider the ideas. We rank them up and put them in a list and then put them in a box to make sense of them. But we don't think about the concepts in the same way Madison anticipated. And his point was it allowed people to be more reasoned. So I think the internet, while very beneficial for humankind, it pushes this reflexive first idea, which is based on an impression and not based on what one knows. It's based on what they feel or what they see.
Yeah. I think that's right. This UI is just really something. Yes, you have control of the chat, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Necro said something funny. I have to say, he says that it's fine as long as we don't have Trump's face on Mount Rushmore.
Oh God, that would be awful. Yeah. I really wonder if there is a chance that across the parties, across Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal, we can come to some common ideas about how to update the Constitution and make it more relevant to today. And I think that would involve some thoughts on the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. And I think it would involve some thoughts on our political process. Any thoughts about that? Pretty clear that the Founding Fathers never imagined a machine gun. And Marshall, you may know more about it.
I was going to say, believe it or not, they actually did. There was a gun designed by a British naval gun maker named Knock, and it was a 6-barreled volley gun, which was one of the first machine guns of its time. They also anticipated being able to reach out and touch. The average gun was a musket sweep bore, probably a Brown Bess Wayne or C pattern, which just refers to the British model. And it could shoot roughly 50 yards with any kind of accuracy. A Kentucky long rifle, which was a flintlock just like the muskets, could touch 400, 500, 550 yards out. In fact, one of the key pieces of the Revolutionary War was how big a role the sharpshooters actually played. I think what they may not have envisioned is the split in the way people think of guns. And this is just a generalization. It's a generalization for the state of Texas, so I can't apply it to the entire nation. But in Texas, there are two kinds of gun owners. There's the gun owner that's in the city and considers his gun an appendage, or as my grandmother would say, like a dime store cowboy. Like, hey, I need to walk around with it, and I need people to see that I have it, versus like, hey, I've got a gun, it's concealed, nobody needs to know that I have it. Nobody ever needs to know I'm carrying a gun, period. Versus a country model, which is guns can be fun, but they are primarily tools to accomplish a mission, which does not often involve killing other people. It's usually a hunting or a game management issue. But I do agree with you that the founders probably would have put in some safety course or something along those lines. Cities during the colonial period had gun regulations. Towns in the Old West, when cowboys came in, you had to, in a lot of places, check your gun with the sheriff because alcohol and guns is a deadly combination. So there's as much room in the American tradition for regulation as there is for holding, any kind of firearm up to what the National Firearm Act prohibits. So they seem to work in tandem. One of the most interesting pieces, for example, about the Second Amendment was that it ended up getting ratified for two main purposes. One was because the cities in the northern part of the country had been occupied by British forces and they didn't have the ability to resist. In the South, at least 2/3 of the planters were impressed by a rebellion in Haiti, a slave rebellion in Haiti, in which they got guns and hung the masters by their toes. So some of the argument refers to this, hey, we need to be able to defend ourselves against our slaves. And then about 1/3 were like, no, you just, you need guns for frontier reasons. Which, the 1/3 basically involved the people that lived on the edge of the colonies, essentially. That's all the way to say that it's not clean cut. So, for example, take a militia. A militia, if you're using it in the English context, not the German context, relies upon people bringing their own weaponry unless the town itself actually has the money. It's derived from a British system known as a fjord from the 8th to the 10th centuries. A fjord was like the gathering of the town, like the folk, and they would bring their own weaponry. So it's not as clean cut in the regulation direction, and it's not as clean cut in the ownership direction. It's a complicated subject with a complicated history. And in many places throughout our growing as a country, there were regulations about not having guns, while in some places there were no regulations about guns. It up until the 20th century seemed to be sort of a patchwork of ideas that were not necessarily regulated at the state level. I can't, off the top of my head, think of a Second Amendment case that doesn't involve either the National Firearms Act or the more recent discussions in, say, like Bruin or Heller, or New York Rifle and Pistol Association v. New York. The modern interpretation of gun rights, at least as I understand it, gets its roots from D.C. v. Heller, which D.C. v. Heller cites a bunch of other cases, which I can't recall at the moment. But that's essentially like where they sat. And I think the slave piece is important just so people know. But we do a poor job in our country of telling the entire story.
We do a terrible job of telling the entire story. And I think, unfortunately, it's hard to interest people in learning the entire story. As I read about this in the modern context, it's scary to me. It's absolutely I can only read about it for so long before I have to tune out, because so many of the things that I knew in my youth are no longer really true. Whether we're talking about guns, whether we're talking about vaccines, whether we're talking about trade, all of these ideas that were in the Constitution were based on a world where travel was not so simple, so fast, so incredibly easy. And I really think we need to, when we talk about originalist versus a living document, we need to come to an agreement among the consent of the governed about updating how we're going to deal with the fast changing environment. And, we had these sessions a couple of months ago about democracy versus republic, which were very stimulating to me, because I had always thought of it more in a national sense and hadn't really considered the local sense. But when you think about a lot of the problems we have right now, whether it's vaccine mandates or whether it's Trump bringing National Guard. It's conflating the boundaries between a local municipality and a national government. Any thoughts on that?
I have one. This is Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
I didn't, I actually learned about Posse Comitatus from a movie. And, I never really understood it well, and still to this day, obviously don't, because I don't understand how so easily they're bringing military into our cities. And I pointed out in another room, and they keep saying, the blue cities, and it is, because like Orlando, Florida, somebody did some research for me and looked it up the other day while we were in a room, that Orlando's higher crime rate is higher than New York's, Chicago's, LA's, whatever, but it's in Florida. And they're not going anywhere near Orlando with National Guard. But, the other thing I want to point out real quick while I'm thinking is, guns, for instance, and things like that. I take the train a lot, I take the bus a lot. And, plane regulation is so strict. But, right now, unless you are a driver or an engineer, you can get on a train or a bus pretty much with anything you want. They occasionally, when there's something happens for a little while, they have some inspection, but basically for the last 3 or 4 years, there's been times where I've been on trains and buses where I felt anxious because and they actually tout in their advertisement, you just walk on, that there's no one checks anything. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway,
that's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about that, but the difference between obviously the risk in a plane where we have all of these inspections and the risk of getting on a bus or a train. And I got in Portland about 4 months ago. I got on the subway system, and these two people almost got in a fight right in the car where I was. And they did have a security person on board, but that is such a fascinating point. And you hate to think that we're going to have to put that kind of security into all travel, but that is a really interesting point, Jim. Although go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said Orlando. If anything, I would think that would actually be another opportunity, because Orlando is like deep blue. It's where Ron DeSantis had his war with Disney. So, that's surprising that Trump would not take that opportunity to try and go and, try to have ICE go and do mass raids down in Orlando, if he could. I would like to, it's interesting.
What people realize, though, about Orlando and Disney, I worked for Disney for 4.5 years. Disney is kind of its own little world of 43,000 square acres. Now, Universal is in the middle of Scary Town. I'll just call it that. Even when I was a kid, International Drive, all that, you didn't go down there after dark. And I helped a friend transition into a nursing home and was there for a year and a half a couple of years ago. And you go into a convenience store and there's actual tables and chairs out there with dealers and pimps and everything out there. Hey, I got what you want, or you want to make a deal. There's people with firearms, I'm told, because I'm blind, but, firearms, right there. And there's lots of gold, lots of cash around. And it's just all over that probably 3 or 4 mile square area, kind of around SeaWorld, Universal, that whole area outside those parks. But Disney is another 10, 15 miles away, kind of still in the middle of nowhere. It's developed a little bit around there toward Kissimmee, which is the next community south. But Orlando proper, you want to be careful traveling around much of Orlando proper. My partner and I went by my elementary school 10 years ago, and he said, "You went to school here?" He said, "Jim, this place is scary." And I said, "Well, it used to be the historic district." And I lived in Winter Park and was bussed in, which, doesn't mean that's historic too. But it's Orlando, though, if any place is calling out for needing some help, if you follow, like I follow WESH, their local NBC affiliate, and I hear about murders and shootings and robberies like all the time. I have to turn off notifications because there's so many. I'll shut up now.
Christina, I've invited you specifically because I'm a little concerned that we are getting a little too heavily male. And one of the things that's clear is that when the original Constitution was written, it didn't include women. It sure does now. And I want to know what you think.
I mean, this is potentially controversial, but I think that it was a great system when it was originally designed for the purposes it was designed for, but 250 or however many years later it is, we have so much that's changed with the rapid advancement of science, of technology, including AI, all of these different things, how we've previously done things. We can't operate that way anymore. And I almost think that we need a more fluid, constantly evolving form of governing, but this is antithetical to the way that we've previously done things. Because if we continue to operate the way we've done things, it's easier and faster for those who want to upset the systems to find loopholes or find ways to, for example, you have a chessboard, there are certain rules of how each piece moves, and that's how government has been done. But you include technology, social media, AI, etc., rapid advancement of science. Now we can use the psychology, the biology of how humans operate individually and collectively. We can expand that chessboard to include the lay of the land that's so much broader. But if some people are still only operating within the framework of the board, then you can't necessarily address all of these other loopholes. But if you create systems that also incorporate our humanness and create systems that evolve and flow and are constantly evolving and counting for the tendencies of humans for good and bad, then we can't necessarily, like, quote unquote, plug the holes or create pathways. The imagery that comes to mind, water flows where it has space to flow, right? If you create pathways in the directions you want things to move and how humans do our tendencies, then we flow in that direction. And if we can build for and adapting for our humanness, because I'm already seeing it from scammers to how this election went to how government's being run, it's influencing emotions, perceptions, our thinking. It's really tapping into our humanness and weaponizing it against us, but we haven't built an infrastructure that leans into that in a positive way. And also not just positive, but like accounting for positives and negatives. And I think a lot of other cultures throughout time, but alone other cultures on the planet currently, have done things differently. And so we've got resources we can look at, just a matter of creating new ways of doing it. So, but like the point A to point B path is potentially a massive undertaking, and also in a hyper individualistic environment means trying to do something that is more relational is counter to it, and there's a lot of resistance to the idea. So
we just say quickly, like what Christina's saying about the system being outdated. The only thing that's fixed about the system, it's actually not even fixed because this can change. The only thing that's fixed about the system is the fact that it takes broad consensus to change it, right? We could change the Constitution to say that no one can wear blue shirts anywhere in the country, right? I mean, we could change it. We could illegalize. We could make voting illegal. We could make, the system is pretty changeable, with the exception of, and this is changeable too, but the funny thing is it takes broad consensus to change it, right? So, I mean, no, we could say that broad consensus is a bad idea. I'm amenable to that idea, right? That and this is how Westminster parliamentary systems work, right? I mean, anything can basically be changed with 50.1%, right? And that might be, but really, I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Ultimately, anything in the system, it can be changed. It just requires 2/3 majorities to make systemic change.
2/3 and 3/4.
2/3 and 3/4 to amend the Constitution, right? And other than that, I mean, so really we're saying in a democratic system, do we want everything to be 50.1, 50+1 kind of thing? Or should some things require broad consensus?
So I have,
This is a
sort
great
of
question,
like-
Scott.
I have just a quick question. Since we've been talking about the big ideas and the need to change systems, I was hoping we could then do a 10,000 foot view. Like, if you could change three things in the Constitution, whether it's part of the amendment process, whether it's a specific part of Article 2, Article 1, Article 3, or whether it's taking away some amendments or adding more amendments, what when you say we should change, what are three of the changes that come most presently to your mind?
This is great. Actually, I think that's a great question. Christina, before it gets away, you raised something, and Scott added to it, that I really think is worthy of discussion, which is pretexting. And I will respond to Marshall's thing as an example of how we can maybe talk about this. I have had twice in my life insurance licenses, and it's very clear in insurance that you are not allowed to pretext in any way. You're never allowed to pretend you're someone else. And I think the conflation of entertainment and politics is a dangerous place. And I'm not sure how to draw the line exactly, but I'm excited by the quality of this discussion versus what usually goes on Clubhouse. And I think it does show there is a hunger for some genuine discussion without it being all about entertainment. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling. To get to Marshall's question, I would, number one, make pretexting in any government sense illegal, and that would mean using bots on the internet. It would mean any kind of phone, auto, where they have auto dialers and it pretends to be a human. It would be any time that a machine pretends to be a human being. I would love to see that be illegal. The other two I would get to immediately would be, I think FDR had a really good idea. It was called his court packing scheme, but I think we needed to talk about some kind of term limits on the Supreme Court or some way of controlling that. And then, of course, I think obviously we have to do something about the Second Amendment, or we're just going to all be in trouble.
Christina, what do you think? The question was directed at the stage, but I'm very curious of your particular view.
I'm still back a few comments, and so I wanted to perhaps clarify or elaborate.
Yes, please, before you get to mine, please clarify. I don't know.
So I hear your point, Scott, about how we just need to have the certain percentage or fraction to make the change. But what I'm trying to highlight is that that's within the framework of the chessboard. But if we look at the legal ways that humans can be influenced outside of that, we know from the Social Dilemma documentary, we know from various books, from various former employees who work at Meta, for example, we know at different studies in Scotland and Australia looking at all social platforms and algorithms and how they've been pointed, they pay attention to how long we pause on things, what we click on, what we like, what we follow, what our city or location is, what our gender is. They pay attention to all of this and begin to use it against us. And we think, because they tell us, that we have choice. If you have a government system that is according to how it's been done in the past, but you are now influencing all of these other factors and many more that I didn't mention in human perception, you can stack the deck. So then you can get who you want into office, and you can stack each separate branch, and then it becomes a completely different game beyond the scope of, because we've got the additional science and the additional tech, and we've got different people with their own agendas, but they're temporarily aligned. And if we don't account for all of these complexities
and we continue to use the system that was complex and great for the past, but is not complex enough for the complexities of today. It's like setting up a mill in a village way back. There were only so many factors you had to consider: resources to build it, where it would go, accessibility for people to come and use the mill, who was going to work it, etc. Right? When you create something today, it is a far more complex world. So there's so many more things to consider. And so, like, if we use government the way it was, and we just need the certain percentage in order to make changes, it's not enough, because people will find other mechanisms to still, quote unquote, legally go about doing government while it's really stacked, and it's not really about doing.
Well, then, Christine, you get to the point where there's a third option, right? We can either go to make systemic change, right? We either need a sort of a broad coalitions, as Marshall said, 2/3 and 3/4 majorities, or we say no, we want just 50+1. Or the third thing is that the deck is so stacked that violence and revolution is the only option, right? That we need a violent revolution, and the people that have the power to do that tech sort of stuff need to be disposed of. I mean, and that's going to have to be done violently, right? I mean, if they have as much power as you say they do, there's no way that influence can be broken outside of revolutionary violence. I just don't see how it could be done.
And I'll just say there are nonviolent. It depending on who is working together. I'll just say I don't want to.
Yeah, no. I was just hoping you'd refocus on the question I asked. When you're talking about change to the governing system, what are 3 things that appear in your mind? Like 3 examples that you have when you think of that.
I don't approach it that way. I approach it from the ground up, looking at human tendencies from our biology, our neurowiring, to the stories we tell ourselves, and also recognizing the patterns of when we follow those stories and when we operate against them, and trying to create new systems that account for those. Once I come up with something like that, I'll dial it back and perhaps plug it in, but I don't approach it in the way they. So Christine, long story short, on the fly, I can't give you precise answers. I mean, we could say take money out. We could say term limits.
Well, let me give
what do you think about
if I'm
eliminating?
Let me give you some examples. Abolish the Second Amendment. Make nationalized health care a constitutional right, and make education a constitutional right. Are those things you might support?
I think it's too complex to just say yes or no to that.
I mean, here though is the issue. The 30 to 50,000 foot view is great. Changing systems is important. But if we don't really think about how we're going to change them, then we wind up with this idea of a needed change with no map to get there. I'm not saying you're not providing a map. I'm saying oftentimes when the conversation stays at the 50,000 foot level, it stays on systems, and we don't end up getting realistic ideas of what we might do to influence the government to get to that place. I think Scott was right. You have 3 ways to change this: revolutionary violence, either 50+1% if you would like a direct democracy like the Athenians had, for example, or direct democracy, or you do what we have now, which is 2/3 of the House and the Senate and 3/4 of the states. The benefit to the system, the way that it works, is the last constitutional amendment was done in my lifetime. I haven't seen, the ERA is the only thing I can think of that had a really robust movement behind it that didn't get made an amendment in my lifetime. That's important because maybe the amendment process is a place to start. I work in campaign politics, so I love the 50,000 foot view because it's interesting, but my mind automatically programs down to the 10,000 foot view. Like, what does this look like for everyday people? That kind of thing. I'm not saying you have to have an answer to it. I'm just explaining my thought process.
Oh, I've got them, but this wasn't the focus of the conversation, and I didn't want to monopolize it by giving you my well thought out TED talk of how I would do this, because that's not where we're talking.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry. You're
okay.
not.
Christina, what do you think about addressing the issue of pretexting, of really, I know it's a little abstract, but you make the same point that I was trying to make, that somehow we've lost control of information, which means it's very hard for us to have a common conversation. And there's really very little legislation about it, except in insurance, that where I'm aware of it, or financial markets. What do you think about that?
I'm torn on it, frankly, because I think the idea of universal understanding was a myth we told ourselves, and now that myth has been busted. The more we have conversations with people of different perspectives, whether locally or globally, I can also understand the need for having some cohesion of language, idea, culture, etc. But at the same time, the idea of codifying it, whatever, making it like legitimate in some way feels really dangerous. And so, like, I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think it would be an interesting thought.
Interesting. Anybody else want to respond to Marshall's question about 3 things that you would like to see addressed in the Constitution now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting though. In the Constitution, I think one of the things, like, it's interesting. This is voting rights has changed. Like, it's in the early days of the country, you had like where it was just the delegates who voted, and a lot of them, the voting was restricted in many states to only people who had property, and that expanded eventually to it's one of the reasons the Democratic Party became, in its early days, became very prominent, was because of expansion of voting rights for the white man, particularly. So it expanded, the voting rights. But I think it's interesting, though. You've had the recent thing with Trump, suing California for doing what Texas did with redrawing the district map. So granted, people will say, it's like California has their own laws. I don't know. To me, it's like, yeah, if you want to argue it's illegal. My thing is, I think Gavin Newsom at least gave people, the voice by putting it into a ballot measure, but that's aside from the point. I think that this issue right now, where it's essentially, to me, it seems like this, sort of gerrymandering is, clearly a power grab. Neither person likes it when their vote is being taken away because one party is redrawing maps to, cancel their vote for their favor. I think that everybody doesn't like that. And so, and they've done it in my state, granted, my home state, and they've also done it in Illinois. And I think this is something that I think, needs to, be addressed as well. That's just what I have to, my 2 cents on that.
What I think is interesting is if we were like Australia, where you have to vote, kind of like taxes and jury selection and stuff like that. I would think it would be a lot more interesting to see how elections would go if voting was mandatory, unless you could declare, some kind of reason, same type of way you would be able to serve on a jury. We fought for the right to be able to vote. And people, not even, what did they say last time? It was 40% of the electorate actually voted, and that's
something like that.
I just wonder what it would look like if everybody had to vote.
Scott, what do you think about that? What about if we made voting a mandatory requirement of citizenship? What do you think about that?
Less people voted. That would be better. I think I'd like to have a basic citizenship test where you had to understand the system, akin to like the test you have to take to be a citizen. Mm-hmm. That would be a great idea.
Instead of just getting 50% of Americans, then it's not a right. Then it's not a right, Scott.
Scott, you mean
What's
like the lady that signed her dogs up to vote? that they just.
There was a lady that's not
what I'm saying is everybody
Or
should
the
take.
people that register to vote at the DMV that aren't citizens.
No, what I'm saying is you should have my argument is you should have to pass to vote. You should have to pass the same tests that immigrants have to pass. Like my friend took it a couple years ago. He was showing me the questions. Like the basic civics test you have to pass to become a naturalized citizen. You should have to pass that to vote.
I got a better one for you, Scott.
That sounds fascist and wacky, but I'm for it.
No, did you see the test? I have to send this to you that they gave students in, I think it was 5th grade in the 20s. And
no, but I want to see that.
Unbelievable. If you can try to get 50% of it, and I doubt you will. It's incredibly difficult, and it was the average test for it's either a 5th grader or a 7th grader in the mid 20s. It's amazing what we used to know.
So, Abby, you are in favor, if I hear you right, I'm putting words in your mouth intentionally, of some kind of testing for people to have the right to vote. Is that fair?
No, I'm in favor of people teaching civics again in school. I'm in favor. This app, if it's taught me anything in the 4 years I've been on it, is how incredibly ignorant American citizens are of civics. And they used to teach it when I went to school in early grades. And it's incredible just the basis of how our government is established, our branches of government, who's responsible for what. I would make every American go to visit Independence Hall and see where it was born and why it was born. I mean, just in the chat now, people saying do not have equal representation from the smaller states. And people don't, I think, even understand how we formed as a union and why we had to give equal representation to all the original states. We would never have been a nation. Thank you, Marshall. But you would know that if you took freaking civics. But it's extraordinary to me.
It's specifically the Virginia and New Jersey plans, right? The Virginia plan was prefaced on popular vote and proportionality to population. The New Jersey plan was premised on a place where the small states were equal to the large states like Pennsylvania and New York.
And Georgia coming in. I mean,
yes, ma'am.
So there's so much to it. But Alan, to answer your original question, the first thing I put in the chat is I would get rid of the pardon, the presidential pardon. It makes no sense in today's environment. It didn't make sense once we formed branches of government and we created checks and balances. It made sense in feudal England, where there wasn't ability to have a check and balance, and the monarch or the fiefdom, the Lord had to get involved and have that right to pardon. But it makes no sense to me, and I think it's divisive. So that would be the first thing.
I am thrilled to hear that. You and I agree. Absolutely agree on that. I completely agree. I am so thrilled.
I say that, although I question how I would have felt as a citizen if we went through a trial for Nixon, like whether Ford did the right thing when he pardoned him. So maybe maybe there's some form, but not. I would amend the Constitution to get rid of it. But that's the one time I understood it. But that's about it.
Well, that is such a great example because I actually lived through that, and I suspect you're younger than I am.
Oh, I lived through it too. We're the same age, I think.
The other thing is the president has the right to declassify anything. So if Donnie has a moment and I go up to him and ask him where the most dangerous things in the United States are, he can tell me, and it's legal for him to tell me.
Well, to get back to this with Abby, I think that at the time I thought Ford pardoning Nixon was brilliant. In retrospect, I think it was unfortunate because it set this incredible precedent that there is no punishment for bad behavior. And if there is one thing wrong with our culture right now, I think the idea that we can't agree on what is what is worthy of punishment, what is worthy of dealing with bad behavior is a real problem.
Alan, I'm on the total opposite side.
We're on the same page with this, Alan, and I think we've seen abuses of the pardon. I mean, I'm not getting political, left or right, but you know all parties have abused it, and I think it doesn't make historical sense. It made sense in feudal England. It just does not make sense now.
Alan, I'm on the opposite side. You know, in the Federalist Papers, they call it the benign prerogative. My theology is at the heart of it is a monergism of grace. I love public acts of extravagant mercy, and I think more pardons the better. I love pardoning. I love when people get pardoned.
You're so Christian, Scott. Quit being so Christian.
Exactly. This is total. This is 16th century antinomian Lutheran Christianity, and I love pardoning.
Well, actually, I think I don't even know how to respond to that, Scott.
And I will take those two Jewish rebukes seriously, though.
No,
No, we're an eye for an eye, Scott. Sorry about that.
Exactly. And one of these is my rabbi down there.
yeah. You mean literally, Abby, when you say eye for an eye?
I'm just quoting the Old Testament. We're playing with Scott. It's his
One of my two favorite testaments.
In the game.
One of my two favorite testaments, like Trump. I'm 50-50.
Oh, Jesus.
No, but seriously, the reason I said what I said about declassification is he had an operation going in Mar-a-Lago in his party room while we were having, a military act overseas. And anybody in the club that just happened to walk in the room while everything was going on and decisions were being made, the situation room was going on right there. And I just don't see how in any sense of anything, how that could or ever should be constitutional. And I'm sure
Jim, we agree with you. I think we agree with you. Denise, you've been very quiet. I would love to know what you think.
Yeah, I think that to make any changes, I think everything has to be on the table, and that's very uncomfortable for the average American, because we tend to romanticize the origin story, ignoring the fact that so many of our laws, our policies, our structures were predicated and built upon slavery. They were built with immoral baseline intentions. And so I think that this idea of anything being a sacred cow would have to come off the table. And so for me, what the first thing I would do is we have to create a structural ability to revisit truth, right? We have to hold people accountable for rampant deception, because it doesn't matter. You can't have a democracy if you have such complete misleading, especially in this technological environment. The ability to kind of manipulate a poorly educated populace has reached a level unlike anything. I don't think there's a relevant example in recent modern history. And so to me, like, the focus would be fairness doctrine, increasing libel laws. You can talk, but you better have some backup for what you're saying. I would get rid of partisan news. I know that sounds crazy. You can't use the word news if you're going to be partisan. I bring back the fairness doctrine of the 80s, that you got to have both sides on and you talk about the topic and you're not framing the discussion. You are presenting different opinions. I think until you figure out how to get some kind of common set of facts, your democracy is doomed.
Boy, I couldn't agree with you more.
Unfortunately,
Go ahead,
Denise, the news isn't reported. It's not viewed the same way it was viewed in the 80s. The ratings for people watching news the way we watched it in the 80s has changed. People, stations will get by with a 2.4 or lucky 3 on an evening on news viewing, when it used to be a 12 or a 15 share for each network. So in order to accomplish what you're saying, and I agree with you, I used to like to hear when they had the opinion piece at the end of the nightly news and they said, this is our opinion, and they don't do that anymore. But you have such a change in how the media is generally and how people receive news that I don't know how you harness that. If you had 3 networks like we had originally, you could, or, you know, even with the 2 big cables when they came in, but I don't see how you harness that now.
I mean, I think you do it the way they did it. Yeah, like I think if you make, for example, take Candace Owens being sued by the Macrons for saying, you know, that she's a trans. Like, you cannot say things that are not true. I mean, and that sounds kind of crazy, but that's how we did it for a really long time. The chicken, which came first, the chicken or the egg, was relaxing these understandings of what your ability to say Sandy Hook was staged. Like these are recent phenomenon, and we're talking. If you know, Marshall's question was pie in the sky. If you could wave a magic wand, if you could change things, what would you change? Would it happen overnight? No, but you cannot move forward. You cannot solve any problem if you do not have the capacity to get to at least a basic shared understanding of the right information. Then you can disagree about, you know, red, white, up, down, purple, orange, right? But we can't even get there because we are so mired in disinformation. And, you know, a good example of this that is not political is think about how large language models work, right? So you have you go to ChatGPT and you say, what fund should I invest my Fidelity account in? What's the best, most profitable, safest deal? Well, if I own a fund, I just have to use AI to write 10 million articles that say my fund is the best. And now you are given the information that this fund is the safest and the best, even though that's not true. That, to me, if we don't figure out a structural response to misinformation and disinformation, I don't know how we move forward.
So I can respond to the first part of what you said. The second part, I'm not technical, so someone else can. But with respect to libel and slander, our laws haven't changed. In fact, you know, the leading cases are still the leading cases, whether it's New York Times, Sullivan, and we can go through them. You still have the ability to sue under, you know, for the disparagement. And if you're a public figure, it's still that higher standard. I mean, that hasn't changed. But what happens is that, first of all, the cost of litigation is so, you know, overwhelming for people. And also, you often don't see the same amount of litigation because the person that's harmed puts their whole person on trial. So everything about you, every email you ever wrote, everything about your life as the victim of the statement is now on trial. And you often see people will shy away from that type of litigation, A, because it's so costly now, and B, because of just what you go through to litigate it. But I don't think that I mean, unless I'm wrong, I don't think that any of those big landmark cases have been overturned. They're still our law. But to the second part of what you said, someone else could probably have more info on that.
This has been incredible. I think next week we should talk about remedies for mis and disinformation.
Can I just say one thing real quick? Because several people brought up the systemic issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, this went back to the 18th century. I mean, Jefferson's solution to this problem that everybody's been pointing out, that you know, there's too much corruption, there's too much systemic, you know, you know, inertia, was to blow the thing up every 20 years, every generation. He thought no generation should govern the next. About every 21 years, he had a kind of odd view on what a generation was, and many of his founding father peers face lots. But for him, it was just reset the whole thing, hard reset every about 20 some years. Now, I mean, that's you know, that's pretty disruptive, but it solves the problem, right? Of things just becoming so intractable, right? That basically that he just thought laws and systems shouldn't be that binding because they're too short-sighted and exactly what some folks have said. That now, again, it's a pretty radical solution, but this is Jefferson. For the 18th century, could be radical and something.
Can I add one?
Well, and theologically, Scott, you have the Jubilee, the 7-year and the Jubilee idea of resetting debts.
And this is from Abby's favorite testament.
Yeah, I mean, this is got some basis in theology. Not to say that should be the end all be all, but it does. But how does anybody make a plan? If you think about Social Security, if you said every 20 years we're going to blow it up, well, that couldn't work, right?
This was when people, when Madison, Jefferson, it was. I mean, the 18th century founders thought this was radical. I mean, but Jefferson saw some of these problems, right, around systemic, just kind of inertia, and so I mean that's. But this is the exact problem that why we didn't go this way. But Jefferson saw the problem.
Can I add one small one?
Go ahead. Yeah.
No more polls.
No more polls.
Nope.
Tell me more about that.
I think it in many ways, especially in this day and age, it sways too many people from engaging or disengaging. Right. So I think I'm not gonna say it's gonna change the landscape completely, but I think it does kind of say, oh, that person's ahead by blah blah blah. So I'm not even gonna go there because.
But Arthur, I want to restate what I think you said because I actually misunderstand you. You could mean no more public opinion polls.
Yes. Yes.
Or you could mean that's what you're talking about specifically.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah. So you're not opposed to democracy. You're not opposed to real voting, but public opinion polls being problematic. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. I didn't mean like polling place. I meant polling public opinion.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting point. Other than Scott, is anyone?
How about this, Arthur? No polls can be released until 2 weeks after any school shooting.
That's an interesting idea.
You'll make the Republicans go crazy.
What? Yeah, well, maybe they'll address the problem.
Wow. Marshall, I really am eager to I'm eager to make sure that we give you as much of an answer to your question as possible because I love that you raised it. I think we have one that we agree on, except for Scott, which is that we do away with the pardon. Is there anyone other than Scott who disagrees with that? Great. There's one answer, Marshall.
I didn't hear the very last part of that. You'll have to repeat.
There's one answer we have, which is only Scott, of all the people who are here, believes that it would be wrong to do away with the pardon power. All of us, I think, agree that doing away with the pardon power would be a good thing. And
I completely understand Scott's view.
Marshall's a Presbyterian. He believes in complete sovereign grace. He's going to be with me now. He's a dour Calvinist.
I am a Calvinist. That is true. And I understand the extravagant displays of mercy. There's a show I like. It's called The Last Kingdom. It's written. It's a TV show based off a set of books by a dude named Bernard.
Oh my god, I love that show.
So, Uhtred, when the character's name is Uhtred, when he's about to be put to death, and maybe put to death, whatchamacallit? Oh shoot. Oh, there he is. No, it's not Uhtred. It's a character named Father Baelka. And it's based on English history in the West Saxons. Anyway, the King Alfred the Great had died. They were about to do away with this main character, and the bishop says we need to move this inside. And Father Baelka yells out, justice must be seen to be done. And I think there is a huge part of me that understands extravagant displays of mercy. I think where maybe Scott and I might depart is in the political use of that. The extreme displays of mercy to people who don't deserve mercy. But as a Calvinist, I'm not the person to decide who needs mercy.
Yeah, but
that's the Lord.
I have a, well, yeah, exactly. That's my point too. I think we have a problem when we conflate religion and politics.
Totally.
You know, render unto Caesar.
Isn't deserving mercy? You don't deserve mercy. Like, you deserve justice. Mercy is what you don't deserve, right? It's something that's by nature gratuitous.
I wish we did it that way. That's not what we do. We sell pardons. That's not how it's actually practiced.
Yeah, and here in Texas, Denise, Marshall, maybe you guys can attest to this, but currently our Governor Abbott is in the second special session and threatening a third because he wants to give extra protection to officers caught in the line of some kind of investigation to not have to release what happened to the public, to the press.
Making a governmental move.
Immunity you're talking about?
Extra immunity, further than already exists.
So further than already exists, but unfoilable, Abby. You won't, like, that's information they won't give you in a FOIA.
Got it. I understand.
Okay, but what I'm concerned about is, like, what happened with the Capitol and 9/11. I mean, justice was served for those that were tried and all that. And so I just don't, I can't fathom any rationale, faith-based or otherwise, of why there would be any mercy there. I just can't.
Well, as somebody who, like, splits I don't know how you do this, Scott, but I split it. I have a religious view and I have a secular view. And the secular view is that a bunch of those people did not deserve to get pardons. Maybe there were one or two who had charged and they were overcharged, per se. I don't really know. And maybe those people deserve some sort of mercy. But if we're talking about people like Enrique Tario and Stuart Rhodes, they were charged with the closest thing to sedition since the Civil War or the beginning of the 20th century. I can't remember which one. And Trump pardoned them. So I'm very much on I am for extravagant displays of mercy, but I understand why the pardon power has to go. If you go back to the Grant administration, he sold pardons. I think Cleveland did too.
Only God can really give extravagance display of mercy. I don't think it's a human thing. I think it's a divine thing. I hope that doesn't offend you.
No, not at all.
Me? No, I believe in Hashem. That's the only place I'm going to get mercy. Sorry, sir.
Well, so Alan, you don't think that it's possible in a human? Have you seen Les Miserables? It's not a sci-fi thing, right? I mean, Les Miserables begins with a human extravagant act of mercy.
But it's not a government display. It's okay.
It's not, and you know what happens at the end of that? The government figure who can't embrace mercy has to kill himself.
Chooses to kill himself.
He chooses. Thank you.
Well, right. It's the nature of it's the way that the law ultimately it's the end of the law. The law killeth, right? The spirit giveth.
I mean, I love one of my all-time favorite movies. Yassi's going to finally think there's something decent about me, is Fiddler on the Roof. I think that is like the world's greatest movie because it does show that there is a limit to where, of course, in that case, it's a patriarchal country, but a patriarchal world. But it does show that there has to be a limit to what a man can forgive, and I believe that. Wow, this has been wild.
So I had one idea for fixing the system, but it would require, Marshall said, well, what is something that you would do? Now, this would require, of course, there's free speech issues here. But I think that you should only be able to contribute to candidates that you can vote for
and it can only be an individual. It can't be a PAC, no PACs. PACs should be outlawed.
How do you deal with the First Amendment outlawing a PAC and your right to
Well, we're talking about an ideal here. We're not talking about reality.
Yeah, it was if you could wave a magic wand and you could.
If I could wave a magic wand, people would only be able to donate no more than $100 to any single candidate, and you could only donate to people that you vote for. And any political ad would have to be signed off on by that candidate. So I think that you would get much, much better quality candidates. And there would be a lot less of this shenanigans that go on now. So I think, you're not going to get past the Supreme Court on that.
So, Rick,
it would take a constitutional amendment to do it.
In your idea, so let's say I live in New York and I really, really, really I want to weigh in on a case that's in Iowa. Could I physically go there and protest, walk? I could do all the things, but I couldn't give cash money. Is that?
Sure. So speech is allowed. You can go out, you can stand in the street, but you wouldn't be able to buy advertising.
Well, how do you get around the fact that, number one, have you been involved in a campaign? But
yes.
Are you connected? Okay, so you know the expense.
Years.
So the last campaign I was involved with, my girlfriend was $21 million on her side alone on her congressional campaign. So your concept of $100 per person, I don't even know if she could buy an ad in the newspaper that people don't read anymore. How is she buying as a straight candidate and not PAC money, because that's almost 8 times the price of what she pays? How is she buying any digital, any media buys? And how are the local TV stations going to stay in business if they don't have media buys from candidates? I mean, they live for the cycles. So, I mean, I'm just saying the effect that it would have. So how are we going to learn about the candidates?
It could be done like how they do in England.
So before we go down the rabbit hole, I want to get everybody to answer the basic question. My attempt is to connect 50,000 feet to 10,000 feet. That's the idea. So, Arthur, it's you. If you could change 3 things in the Constitution, 1 to 3 things, you don't actually have to say 3 if you don't want to. If you change 1 to 3 things in the Constitution and you weren't dealing with practicality, because we're going to connect practicality in just a minute in the discussion, but how would you change the Constitution? What would be an addition or a subtraction or a modification you might make?
So yeah, the one I added was no more opinion public polls. And the second one I'm adding is that they should make it, I think like it's in the UK, candidates can only run for a certain time. And it's public funds for a certain amount. So you limit the amount of time that people can run, and then you just make it, I think that right there would eliminate so much.
Interesting. Alex, are you there? I don't think I've heard you yet. Alex. Bueller. Nobody there? Okay. El Normo, wave a magic wand. You could change 1 to 3 things about the Constitution. What would you change?
I clean up the grammar. Like, for example, how does the second go? An armed
well-regulated militia being necessary and proper to the maintenance of a free state, I believe.
Yeah, I would clean that up so that so that people can't argue that the first part of the sentence isn't connected to the second part. That's, off the top of my head.
Sweet.
I never would have. I wouldn't ban alcohol, and then we wouldn't have to repeal the ban on alcohol.
So now let's try to take our adaptions and connect them to what we would need to do. We don't have to go too far down that hole. Maybe like 1 step. So we want to do this. How would we get there? Because that's also an important piece in the thinking about the Constitution. And my idea in having this question in my own room about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago was to make people wrestle with bits and pieces of it. Think about it, consider what it could be used for, how you can improve it, that kind of thing. So we did the 50,000 foot thing. Let's connect it to 10,000 feet if we can. If it has to stay ethereal, great. But I get told all the time I'm too ethereal and I have to take it down to 10,000 feet. So anybody that wants to go, please, how would we accomplish your goals after you wave the magic wand?
You mean how do you obtain an amendment to the Constitution? Are you asking that? I mean, there's
I'm asking
lots of areas in the Constitution that could get cleaned up.
No. I'm saying people who want changes with how we have this system today. How do you then practically get to a solution? Is it a quick solution, or is it going to take a long period of time to get to?
You probably have to do the things that are pissing off everyone in the room that we have. So in order to get what you want accomplished, you're going to have to lobby, which that's a dirty word to a lot of people, but it's our right to petition. You're going to probably have to contribute into campaigns that enough to make a difference to those candidates that they are going to champion the cause that you want. So all the things that you're fighting against, you're going to have to utilize in order to get in line those votes to make the change.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely that there should be, limits on how much you can donate to each candidate. Because, I mean, essentially, I think that's antithetical to, when people say that, you vote with your dollar, that implies that if you have more money, that means you have more power. And so that's why I don't think the government should be based on how much money you can contribute to each politician.
So what did Harris get? $1 billion? How much did she finally raise?
I think about $1
billion. She raised a lot of money.
Like $1 billion.
And I think it's corrupt.
We haven't we're wandering down the rabbit hole without CM. CM, you haven't answered the question yet. If you could change 1 to 3 things, what would you change?
About the Constitution?
Yeah, man. If you could wave a magic wand, I'm asking you to sit at the 50,000 foot level. If you could just wave a magic wand and fix 1 to 3 things about the Constitution that irritate you, what would you do?
I almost wouldn't change a thing. The problem is that our founding fathers wrote a nearly perfect, how they say, living, breathing document, amenable to be changed with the correct right number of votes. They wrote a near perfect document. The problem is that the best political document written in history. Period. Full stop. The problem is that, obviously they lived in a time where things like the Second Amendment, they were talking about people had muskets, not automatic weapons, so they couldn't think that far ahead.
Just a history piece. It depends on how you define that. A lot of people had muskets, but a lot of people in the colonies had what were known as Kentucky long rifles. A musket was acted out about.
That's a minor detail, but who cares? Point is, they couldn't envision the type of weapons we have today. They couldn't, in terms of the Second Amendment, they couldn't envision things like social media and the internet that would affect our society, and misinformation and all this. If it wasn't for these things like that, these modern problems, that it's almost a miracle how well actually the Constitution worked for 250 years, and the intervening 250 years since it was written. We became the wealthiest, freest, most prosperous, innovative nation on the face of the planet in all of human history in 250 years, based on that document. It worked miracles for a really long time. But yeah, the wheels are starting to come off because the world has just changed way too much that no matter how wise Jefferson and Madison and all these guys were, who are like my heroes, there's some of my not scientists. They're the other one, my other heroes that are not scientists. Except for they could only see so far into the future. Obviously they can never imagine anything like the internet or social media or anything. And so it worked. Like I said, it worked wonders forever. But for a really long time, made us the greatest nation on the planet. But it's
But I'm gonna direct you just a little.
It was gonna run out.
Sure. I just want to say one thing in response to that. When we say this, when we say what they didn't see and saw, if it's outdated, which it very well may be. I mean, the whole thing could be outdated. Every sentence, right?
No.
But it's interesting that really they thought the whole thing could be outdated. They didn't make anything sacred. Every single sentence in the Constitution, every single sentence could be deleted. The one thing that we're arguing about, I think, what it gets down to is broad consensus to change it, right or not, right? Are these 2/3 and 3/4 requirements? I mean, we can make a change that no one can wear blue. We can make a change that says no one can make over $100,000 a year, and that anything over that should be redistributed to poor people. Any of that could be constitutional. Anything. The question is the broad consensus required to make these changes. That's really what we're arguing about. I mean, at the essence of that is did the idea in the 18th century that changes, the structural changes to the Constitution, not legislation, like we can make all sorts of laws, but structural changes to the actual founding document, right? Should that require broad consensus, right? We could pass a law that says no one is allowed to wear a blue shirt. The question is, people would probably say that's an extension of free speech, right? Then we'd be a constitutional thing. Then to change that requires broad consensus. So that's what really we're arguing. When we say are the founders right or not, were the founders right about requiring broad consensus to make systemic change or not? And if we can answer that one, we get at the root of
the answer is obviously yes. I don't even know what question you're asking.
Well, he's asking a question
in the sense of it can't obviously.
Hey, CM, could you just hold on a second? We have our main mod, Alan, speaking. If you could just wait till he's done, I'd appreciate it. Alan, please go ahead.
Scott is asking a question about mechanics, and I think he's making a damn good point. If we look at when the Constitution was founded, the ruling class was the wealthy. It was white men. We now have blacks, we have women, and we have an effort to broaden the electorate. So I think that Scott raises the right question. How do we even measure and find a broad consensus? And I don't know the answer.
I think we're severely handicapped by gerrymandering and dark money. Right? You should have to come to our district and make your case to be selected. I don't think that the elected officials should pick their voters. Make your case, present your ideas, and you cannot do that if, like we just had in Texas mid-census, you just kind of move the goalpost and make the wiggliest archipelago whenever you get ready. And I don't care which side does it. It contradicts the foundational belief that every person has a vote, right? That is literally what we are struggling with right now. We do not have a representative democracy right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, Denise, do we even does everyone on the stage believe that everyone should have a vote? Do we all hold that in common?
I think everybody who's
we already covered it. We don't have consistent voters.
Right, but then
Somebody said there should be a poll. People have already said a myriad of answers to that. What did you want? The answer was no. Should we?
Then you're taking away the elections clause, and you're taking away from.
You're okay, Abby.
I think she was talking about the elections clause and the time, place, manner clause. Time, place, manner clause is the thing that derives elections down to the state. There is a piece of the Constitution where it says Congress can step in and make a law. If anybody's interested, we have been using the pinned link of the National Constitution Center based in Philadelphia. The National Constitution Center is, and I think I'm going to repeat their credo just about correct, the only institution funded by Congress to disseminate information about the Constitution on a nonpartisan basis.
Marshall, the director will be coming on the Divis Tech podcast in October. Jeffrey Rose will be my guest.
It's
He
the
loves
best
Brandeis.
place.
He's a huge Brandeis fan.
Shout out to Philadelphia for having it there, and it's absolutely a pilgrimage people should make. Go to the Constitution
I
Center.
think the best part about
This week, Abby, it's a spit out for Philadelphia, right?
Excuse me?
A spit out, not a shout out. Galen Carter.
Oh, yeah, good. I got you. All right. Provoke.
So the point I was making was the National Constitution Center's teaching resources are great because they give the median view, they give the left center view, and they give the right of center view. They have had in 2 separate years Neil Gorsuch first be their honorary chair, and then the next year it was Chris Coons of Connecticut. And for those who don't know Chris Coons, he's served in Congress, I think, for at least 3 terms, or in the Senate for at least 3 terms. And he is a lover of the U.S. Constitution and the need for updating. He is, from what I can tell, somebody who genuinely believes that the document we use to govern ourselves is important. Never met the dude, but that's just an assumption.
Okay, I am kind of obsessed with it finishing within an hour and a half just because I think it makes for a better discussion if people have a sense of an ending. I really think this was interesting. I'm so thrilled to find that Abby and I have an area we can agree on. There probably are many others. I also am delighted that there was no pretexting today. I think I was thinking about this when I was young. Somebody brought over to our house, and of course, this was the old days of great records, that you put a needle on. But a record that was kind of a political satire about Nixon, and my dad just went ape. And he was a fairly conservative person and so forth, and I didn't really understand it at the time. And I suspect that he couldn't have given me a logical answer to why it upset him so much at the time. But I think it gets to our notion of truth. I'm obsessed with the idea that Santa Claus is something that is very bad to teach our children, particularly for those of us who have Christian faith, because of the same basic reason that we have a need to know what is true. I feel like I'm wandering. I don't mean to. I think we should revisit this same topic next week. I think next week we should all come to the room with an answer to Marshall's question. If you could change 3 things about the Constitution, what would you change? I think that would be a very useful thing. And I'd like to start moving towards a close. If anybody has any closing comments, I'd welcome them.
I got By the one, way, and it's something I want to echo from Denise. Yeah. Somebody told me this previously. Don't set the founders on a pedestal. They had great ideas for the time. They wrote great things that are still applicable today. But putting them on a pedestal, I think, does not allow. Putting them on a pedestal represents an element of sacrosanctness that they may not necessarily always deserve. For their good decisions, sir, if we should think they're good, but for the wrong decisions they made, we we should be able to criticize them as well as hold up their good decisions. I'm a big proponent of history being told the whole story. You tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you let the people who listen to it make up their view of it afterward. But you don't leave out anything. And so not having them on a pedestal brings them into the realm of being real people who you can criticize. And I think as somebody who too often myself sits the founders on a pedestal, that it's really helpful when people don't do that.
Marshall, I do have a question for you about the founding fathers.
Yes, sir.
Story. The amount of alcohol they drank the night before the Constitutional Convention, is that a true story?
Yes. They drank a prodigious amount of alcohol.
Nobody's saying the founding fathers are perfect. They were humans just like us. They were just amongst the wisest humans. Again, because they think about what they were doing. They were trying to escape every shitty type of government from the old world, so from Europe, all these monarchies and totalitarian countries, and they wanted to come to United States. They came to the United States. They wanted to build a form of government that was completely antithetical to everything they left back in the old world. And they did their best. They did their.
Antithetical.
Nobody's putting them on a pedestal as like they're perfect. They just did an amazing job. Look at the country today.
Sam, hold on a second. The founders, in their own right, before they got to we need a different governing document, applied for the rights of Englishmen along the basis of the English Constitution, which was written with the Magna Carta in 1215. So they were very, very wed to the Enlightenment ideas of Great Britain at the time. What they were fleeing pursuit from a lot of the time was an established church, and how a lot of the folks that were Quakers and more Puritany did not have the ability to freely worship because there was a state religion in England.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you
think
we could have a constitutional? Do you think we could have a constitutional convention today? Do you think they could put a group of people together and write a constitution?
You would go straight into some form of like hyper-authoritarian government. I think putting all of the sovereign power of America in a room, since what we did the first time was, hey, you're supposed to amend the Articles of Confederation, not come up with a totally new document. All of that sovereign power in a room, I don't trust.
Yeah, these politicians today, I don't think they're mature enough to go nowhere near that Constitution. And we already know the type of things that they would change. That First Amendment is going away. That Second Amendment is going away. The Fifth Amendment is going away. All the things that these politicians need to weaponize their power against people is going away. So, yeah, this batch of politicians, 100%. They're just not mature enough to touch. Yeah, they're not mature enough to touch them. You know, the Constitution, like somebody said earlier, is a perfect document. The problem is, it's just like in law. How the law is written and how it's applied is two different things. And that's what's wrong with the Constitution. They don't actually do things in regards to the Constitution. It's like the Bible. You know how people pick and choose what parts of the Bible they want to believe in? The Constitution is the same way.
Abby, I'm curious to know what your answer to the question that you asked is.
I know from another country that has had a Constitution Committee now for many years and very bright people on it, and they can't get a consensus. I'm not going to get into what country it is, but they've been debating and they can't put together a constitution. I don't think we could, but I did want to say to DJ, if all of a sudden they abolished the first, second, fourth, let's get rid of search and seizure, let's get rid of the fifth, you still have the Ninth Amendment, which is curious, because if you look at the Ninth Amendment, and let's say they didn't get rid of that, that gives you fundamental rights that aren't enumerated, that aren't stated. So unless they said you don't have a right to free speech, they just got rid of the amendment, you still might have it implied in the 9th Amendment. It's just food for thought. But
I mean, that makes sense.
I think you could not find if you took our best scholars, if you took every top constitutional scholar that publishes what we call the Horn books, the treaties of constitutional law, put them all in a room to try to write it, I just don't think it could happen today.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we're way too divided. It's different. We're way too divided. It's different. They were writing the Constitution right after, the Revolutionary War. So, like, they were united under, like, just because they were all facing a common enemy of, King George and
the Constitution, though, they were not united. They split themselves into two-man camps, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, at the Constitutional Convention.
No, yeah. Well, I'm talking about compared to today. Like, they were a million times more united than we are today.
But they also had the advantage of a failed interim step, right? I mean, so the Articles of Confederation, which were much more minimalist, weren't working, right? And so they had that, and really the Constitution, I mean, this is where people question the legality of the Constitution, rightly, right? There was no mandate to go write a new Constitution. There was a mandate to what they were called to do was to get together and amend the Articles of Confederation. And they just said, all right, now we're going to start from scratch and write a new Constitution, which they really didn't have the authorization to do, but the states signed off on it. They wound up, the states ratified it, but that was not their charge when they went in.
So let me ask y'all a question. If we were to release everybody from prison who shouldn't be there per the Constitution, say they're there, if somebody was to look at their case and match it up with the Constitution, what percentage of prisoners you think will get released from prison?
Like, what part of the Constitution, though? Do you mean, like,
just
their Fifth Amendment rights were violated? Do you mean,
habeas corpus? What are you talking
about? Or, like, the 14th Amendment to due process?
Just any part of it. Any part of the Constitution that we're going to weigh against his case, and we're going to decide if he should be released from prison or not because it was a constitutional violation.
Well, it depends on, like, where the person committed said offense and what they did. For it to be a constitutional violation on the state level, it has to be both violation of state law or policy as well as violation of federal law or policy. So the question would be, at least first, what are they charging this person for on a state level, and then what are they reaching to the federal level to charge if it's a violation of the Constitution, right? My point is like the 15th Amendment, where you don't get actual due process as prescribed by law in both the 15th and the 14th and the 5th Amendment, right? So you could file then if you didn't get the right to due process. But the question is, like, are we talking about taking people for minor amounts of drugs? Are we talking about people who got caught up in federal sting operations that really didn't have anything to do with them in the first place, right? Like, it requires a specific part of the Constitution to look at. I understand what you mean, but we need some examples to hone in better on what you're trying to say.
So,
is it an appeal, a conviction, or something like that?
No, just like DJ Fridays.
Yeah, if you got the money to do that, I just was always under the impression that they wrote that in order for there to be a crime, there has to be a victim, and the majority of people in prison are there for victimless crimes, and then just all the other due process violations that come from judges and the DA, and people go to prison on that shit because they don't have the money to fight. You gotta have money to do an appeal. That ain't nothing for people that are financially challenged.
We afford counsel to indigents in our country.
Even for appeals?
We afford counsel. I mean, people have PDs. That's
She's
why
saying they provide a free lawyer
public
for
defender.
who are poor.
If you can't afford your own lawyer, you're assigned a public defender.
But DJ, are you talking about situations if you're incarcerated, then it's probably going to be a Fourth Amendment violation or something regarding the evidence and whether something was tainted. I mean, I'll just try to use an example that would come up with someone who got convicted of a crime, and they could argue, fruit of the poisonous tree arguments, something like that. I mean, that's going to get tested through our court system, which is constitutional, and you are going to have a jury of your peers, and you are going to go through that process, and you are going to be afforded counsel. So what part along the way are you contesting? That you didn't have a proper hearing, a proper trial, it didn't comply?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things. I just see it like, just all of those things, man. In this country, if you don't have the resources, I know you can get a public defender. I know you can get that. But man, those dudes, damn, they getting paid by the same people that the state is getting paid for. They're those people colleagues. Public defenders, I get why they're needed, but that's not, I don't know. I've just always felt like that wasn't real counsel. Because they're working, they literally work for the same people that they're defending you against.
Oh boy, DJ. I have so many friends that would tell you to go take a hike, that work their asses off as PDs. You do that to get your trial time in. But there are people that are career PDs I believe
that. No, I'm not saying
they work hard, those guys. Same with the young DAs and the prosecutors. I mean,
not all states have the same kind of policies and PDs. In the South, you don't find nearly as many public defenders, and you don't always get access equally in all urban environments. So to say it's a common right for everybody is false belief.
And just growing up, I've never been in trouble with the law ever in my life, but just having friends, and I'll go to their court cases with them, man. The public defender is like just rubber stamping everything. It's like he's just there to guide you to prison. He wasn't really advocating for you. And I'm not saying this applies to everybody, because everybody has their own ambition level. Yeah, because if I was a public defender, I'm trying to win those cases to put the score on the board so I can one day have my own practice. That's what I would do. But it's so many times, man, where a lot of public defenders, especially in certain communities, man, they're just there to be a rubber stamp for the court system. There's lawyers that are private lawyers that are full of shit. That, they just want to get paid. They don't really advocate for their clients.
Everything's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to close this 10 minutes ago. This is very useful, but I don't want to moderate it beyond the time. I'm not sure what to do. I think what I'll do is close it, and we will open this up again next week. Marshall has left, it looks to me like, and this was his question. So I think he was expecting it to be done at 3:30 or my time. I'm in the Pacific Coast. So we will open this again next week, and I don't know. We'll try to pick it up where we left off. Try to make it a little more organized. But I really appreciate everyone's participation, and I particularly appreciate that there was no pretexting today. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Come right over here to ask you a question, so I don't want to hear nothing.
That's what my mom be saying. Quesadilla.
You need somebody to translate? Yeah, for homework.
Oh, okay. I'd be like, where's
my mom from Kentucky? She'd be like, "Oh, I love some tortillas." I'm like, what? Tortillas.
I almost choked on that.
They're so good. Can I get some extra tortillas when you come? Hey, girl, let me order.
Give me some
tortillas.
Not tortilla.
Tarantulas.
They have the best tortilla chips, baby.
Did you guys see where they said for the media, do not cover any disturbances or anything about people having anything to say about Trump? Any protesters at the U.S. Open? Don't broadcast that shit.
They literally snuck him in, and then they snuck him in before the crowd got there. Yep. And then when people were booing, they cut the audio so that we can't hear the boos.
Yeah, they don't cover that at all.
They shit, April, they was like...
Well, they covered it because I saw quite a few videos with them booing the shit out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all gonna get in trouble for posting it.
Yeah.
You know what? Do y'all remember a few years ago? Well, not a few years ago. When he it was before he became president. He got roasted for his birthday on Comedy Central.
And got mad.
Oh, he got so mad, and then everybody was like, he was telling us not to post shit and to cut shit out or whatever. Like he was like this. Everybody was like, I would never do this again. I would never want to roast him again. He has the worst sense of humor. He was visibly uncomfortable.
He act like a little bitch over that shit.
Let them roast you the way they tore Justin Bieber ass up.
Hot.
I can't find my phone. Which one?
The one that you can text me on. If you texted me, it's because I can't find it. You said by the big pot? I don't see nothing here.
Can I ask you guys something real quick? See if I'm doing the right thing. Shit. If somebody does your pedicure and this bitch fucks it up to her, still
Tell her redo it.
No, okay.
What you mean effed it up? How they F it up?
Okay, you know when you're supposed to be doing the cuticles and all that stuff, and my foot was rubbing on my work shoe, so it had like a little bit of a callus. It's not even a big callus. She goes, we don't do that. I'm like, what? You don't scrub down a free?
Yeah, because they don't want to get sued.
Shit.
Don't give her a prune, bro.
Huh?
Why would you give her a prune?
No, wait, why would I give her a what?
And you gave her one.
I did.
Girl, I think she needs to go on mute. I think she needs to go on mute.
Wait, is he talking to me or?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's why I wear toe separators because I wear boots all the time. So at night, after I take a shower, I put toe separators on my feet so I don't ever have to get fat. That's what you need to do. Like,
yeah, I mean, rubbing because my feet are like swollen, and I was like, okay, so it's rubbing, and then like when I went to her, it's not even a.
Sister Wife, how far are you from your phone right now?
Me?
Have you just walked off and left your phone because you?
No, I can hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear. It's very low.
Yeah. That's like.
Yeah, that's because I'm outside and I have the earpods in outside. I felt some kind of way giving her that money because in New York you don't tip. They got a fucking attitude if you come back.
Yeah, but you want her to sue this callus off your feet, girl. You better go see her down. I'll pay you work for it.
It's not petty. It's not that big. It's like it's supposed rubbing. It only rubs.
Well, then get a pumice stone. Get a pumice stone.
I'm going right now to go get one because it's not even that big. It's from that night I worked 16 hours and it just kept rubbing. So you just
You know what you should get?
stoning it. What? You know what I'm saying?
No, get the this thing. It's called a foot mask, and it like exfoliates your foot. Baby, give you a whole new foot.
A foot mask?
Big dead skin.
Yeah, they gotta have
it'll remove that. It like removes it over like a period of like a week. It peels off. But like any extra, everybody should try this. Y'all are probably
it's gonna take a week. I better go get it now. Shit.
Yeah, it's like it uses I think like fruit acids or something, and it just exfoliates your foot. It's kind of disgusting, but the end of it.
Inches and hide if you do it.
Yo, my friend said he wear a different shoe size now.
What's going on? Nah. I'm the same shoe size, and I always do that shit.
That's what he told me. I don't know if it's true.
So his callus went down that big. He went down. He get
No,
a new
but
size.
it not only removes a callus, but I'm gonna get a little scientific real quick. You know, the skin on your feet is 20 times thicker than the skin everywhere else, right? So any of you get a lot of dead skin on you, even if you don't feel it, you do. So it even the top of your foot, it peels all of that off.
Yo, it's so cool the way it peels.
It's not cool. It's so gross.
It is so cool. My kids love to. Okay. They're like, Mom,
it's so gross. When you take your sock off, it looks like a drill. You be like,
Okay, stay focused. So what happened now? So what happened to your friend's foot?
Oh, so he did
so
one.
He's a smaller size.
We all did. But I seen his feet before. He don't have bad feet or nothing. It was never like crusty or nothing. But he said that he did one. And we was talking about, because if you never did it before, the first time you do it, it peels for like longer than a week, like maybe like 10 days. It just keep on peeling. And so he was